Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am your host, E.62. I'm an author and mental health counselor. Are you curious about therapy? Do you feel there is a lot of mystery about therapy? Do you wonder what your therapist is doing and why? The goal of this podcast is to make therapy and psychology accessible to all by using real language and straight-to-the-point discussions. This podcast wants to remind you to take care of your mental health, just like you would your physical health. Therapy should not be intimidating. It should be a great way to better health. I will demystify what happens in counseling, discuss topics related to mental health, and discussions you can have with your therapist. I also want to introduce psychology in everyday life, as I feel most of our lives are enmeshed in psychology. I want to introduce the subtle and not so subtle ways psychology plays a factor in our lives. It will be my own mix of thoughts as well as special guests. So join me on this discovery of therapy and psychology. Hi, and welcome to episode 62 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am Steve Biso. If you haven't listened to episode 61 yet, please do so. Catherine DeMonte and I talked about shadow work, which is very interesting and something that I think everyone should do. But episode 62 is another subject that's really near and dear to my heart, which is sobriety and recovery. I haven't really talked about it in a full episode since probably episode 5 with David Bassano. I know that me and Pat Rice and other guests have talked about it here and there about recovery and sobriety, but I haven't dedicated a full episode to it. And Rachel Fletcher is someone that reached out to me via LinkedIn. She was listening to my podcasts fairly regularly, which is cool, and I appreciate that. And she is the community liaison at Moving Mountains Recovery. Rachel has been in recovery herself for over 5 years. She also owns a tattoo studio in South Florida, and she is also an avid rock climber. She believes that rock climbing can bring benefits for your recovery and your mental health. She also has other ventures that she does on social media, and I'm hoping that she will talk about that. And I figured I'd give you the title. It's called Climbing with Boobs. So I figured that would catch your ear, and here is the interview. Well, hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. We're on episode 62, the last one of the season. And I guess I kept the best for last. We're also on YouTube on episode 12, so that hopefully you can get on YouTube. Check that out. I hope you all do. But it's interesting because I love working with recovery. I've been working with it for about 23 years professionally. If my family's listening, cover your ears for a second. With my own family, 47 years. But but I do love the subject, and I haven't done it enough on my podcast. So Rachel, reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it was kind of weird because sometimes you get people reaching out, but she was like, "Oh, I like your podcast. I would love to be your guest. You seem to know a lot about recovery." So I'm like, I want to have another conversation about recovery. And I was going to wait till next season. And I'm like, no, I need to start it now. So Rachel Fletcher, welcome to Finding Your Way Through.
Hi. I can't believe I'm the last one on the season. I didn't know that. I feel special.
Well, the good news is that means like if your numbers are high really quick, you become the most popular episode. The bad news is you got a lot of time to catch up. So I don't know.
Yay.
But recovery is something that to me, we don't talk about enough, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I think that the last time I talked about was like I said, episode 62.
It was like a year ago.
Yeah, it was with David Bassano. And I want to talk about it more because to me, mental health, substance use is 95% linked. I think that I've told people before. Pat Rice talks about it sometimes too when we're working together. And I've said this, and most people don't like what I say, but I've only met one straight drunk in my whole entire life. Like he was just a drunk. He wasn't mentally ill. There was no depression, anxiety. He's just a straight drunk. And people are like, oh, that's terrible. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's reality. Because usually it's linked to other stuff. But anyway, Rachel, I'm not going to take over because I wanted this to be more about you. So welcome, as I said. And how about you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Okay. So my name is Rachel Fletcher. I myself am in recovery. I got sober March 27th, 2017. So I recently picked up 5 years. Thank you. I do a few things. I always say that I'm kind of a strange person. So I co-own a tattoo shop in South Florida, a large studio with about 13 artists. And I love that work. And then I've also when I got sober, I wanted to work in treatment. I knew that. And the day I had a year, I applied for a job and I started as a behavioral health technician. And I worked my way up and I've worked various positions. Now I'm a community liaison for Moving Mountains Recovery, which I'll get into what that is
Please
later
do.
on.
Yeah.
And then I'm also an avid rock climber, which is like it's my whole world. It's my everything. And I incorporate the climbing in pretty much all that I do in like recovery with mental health. I run like a funny page with two of my friends called Climbing with Boobs, which was a name that I came up with because I was like sex sells people and like I can't tell you how many people are probably going to click on this because of the name. And then they realize it's just three girls who are climbing and it kind of played on the whole like female empowerment. But ever since we started the page on TikTok, which I was anti TikTok because I'm 29, so I'm a little after that generation. And the first video we got had like 20 million views. So
Oh,
we
geez.
grew, yeah, we overnight like grew and had like 50,000 followers on it, which was kind of wild. And now we like continue to grow and people reach out to us all the time. They're like, "Oh, you guys are the reason why I started climbing." A lot of young girls too. So it's been like a positive thing. And I try to always tie back in like why I climb, which is really cool.
Well, it's kind of, I was laughing when you said that because I
Yeah.
remember when I said, I send the disclosure stuff to everyone. It's not a secret. And then you sent to me a very interesting video with that. So about climbing. So I was like, all
Yes.
right, I know who I'm dealing with. That's my people. That's my folks. I appreciate that. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that too.
Yes. A nice climbing vid. Yeah, very humorous. And like on on the page, like we make fun of a lot of stuff. I think humor is a really good coping tool.
Well, and maybe it's a good question to ask with the
Yeah.
humor because I think that for me that's when people ask, I don't know why it's been a subject for many people recently, but what's your
Hmm.
passion? What do you do? What do you this? What do you that?
Right.
And I'm like, if you're able to laugh about it, doesn't have to be your passion. You just need
Right.
to be able to laugh. Do you feel that that's like kind of like goes with a lot of different things, including sobriety, mountain climbing? I mean, just about everything. Do you think that that plays a factor in all that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I have a saying that I say when usually it's after I say a really messed up joke about something that most people wouldn't laugh about. I say, well, if I'm not laughing, then I'm crying.
Right.
Like for me, that has always been a tool. It probably came more into play as like a child growing up in like a dysfunctional home. I learned to cope with laughing and everything. But I feel like climbing definitely brings a level of enjoyment in my life and it's fun. It's super fun.
But I think that I'll go. But if you ever have a chance, and I like to plug my own show too.
Yeah,
Episode 49, I talk about dark humor and the importance of it. So I think that for me, when you're not able to laugh even about dark stuff, you're basically kind of like screwing yourself over.
absolutely.
We're on the same page yet again. So, how does a journey go from co owning a tattoo shop to now owning a treatment center to incorporating climbing and all that? I mean, like,
Hmm.
if you said that, like, if you gave that as a writing tool in a class, all right, make these three work together, go. Most
They
people would be like,
wouldn't.
what the hell's wrong with this?
You know what? Like, I mean, when you're saying it out loud, I'm like the only way that that happened with some extra universal power, just also having a sense of humor about everything. When I got sober, I had absolutely nothing, to be honest. I came into treatment. It was my second time. So I experienced what relapse feels like. But my second time, I owned nothing. I didn't have a dollar to my name. I treated every person that worked in the treatment center as some sort of like shaman with like wisdom to give me, whether they were my therapist, the nurse, or just a tech. And I took suggestions and I kind of ran with it. But I got to sober living when I got out. I was 24. So I really needed to learn how to honestly be a contributing member of society. Like I didn't know how to be an adult at all. I used my entire
just for some of people who may not know what sober living
Oh,
means,
yeah.
I just want to.
Sober living. So sober living is it's kind of like a bridge between leaving treatment, starting this period of sobriety to being completely on your own. It gives you this extra level of accountability. So I lived in this sober living that had about 12 women in it. There was two beds in each room, so you're kind of in this like dormitory style of living, all walks of life, all ages, different people in different seasons of their life, but all with a common goal of we're getting sober. They drug test you weekly to kind of hold the accountability. They also usually do like a weekly meeting to see like how is everyone doing? What goal are you working on? And they also do kind of funny things like they make you make your bed every morning. And that's something I do till this day. And it's weird. I feel like that little change in my behavior creates success. And they just start
Right.
instilling these little things, and it basically you kind of get on your feet. I stayed for a year, and you have curfews, and then as time goes on and you start to build trust, and you see that okay, this person's doing the right thing, they start to let you like take a pass to go for a weekend or stay somewhere. But it's like kind of this transition phase. Most people don't realize that recovery, well, first off, it's so hard and the success rate is so low. I think it's like 10%, but I don't even know if that's true because in my opinion, I don't really think you can measure success in recovery. Like who's creating that? That statistic, are they following people for years after sobriety? You know, is success like staying sober for 90 days? And I honestly think success is not so like linear anymore. Like I don't think continuous sobriety means success. I think that like gaining some sort of lessons that add up.
No, and before we go on, I want to just respond to that too. Yeah, the numbers are so random in my opinion. I've worked
Right.
with 9,000 people plus in my career. I want to say that there's one person who got sober right away,
Yeah.
never relapsed. That doesn't mean they were in recovery.
100%.
And I tell people, like, for me, success is not sobriety. Anyone can be sober.
Right.
Recovery, now that's the hard work. And
Oh,
if you're in
yeah.
recovery, and how do we measure recovery versus sobriety? But for me, it's really easy. Recovery is doing the work in order that the mental health work, the substance abuse work, in order to be successful in life. Sobriety just means you're not drinking or not using or not whatever.
Abstaining. Yeah, I agree. So I don't know. The sober living provided like an extra layer of support,
Right.
basically. It just taught me a lot of things. But I lived in sober living and I being surrounded by a bunch of women all with the same goal, I saw how other people were experiencing their journey of being sober. And I kind of from that was like, okay, I see the things I don't want to do. That's really what I saw. I was like, okay, I see a lot of people just kind of coasting by. And you said earlier, you were saying like it's more popular now to be like, what are you passionate about? I've always kind of thought like that. I've always asked people when I first meet them, what are you passionate about? And I wanted to not just be sober. The idea of being 24 and getting sober felt like I was missing out or that like I was cutting my party short or that I would never have fun again because my only experience of fun was going out with my friends, having beers. I just had a disease that made me never be able to stop. I always took it too far until the point where it wasn't fun anymore. So getting sober, I wanted to like learn how to have fun. And I tell this a lot of the people that I mentor that you can either look at this as, okay, I ruined my life and now my fun's over and now I'm just going to be sober and abstain. Or you can pretend that you're Julia Roberts in the movie Eat, Pray, Love and say that I'm divorcing. This is my metaphor, okay? You're divorcing from drugs and alcohol, and now you're going to find who you really are. Because that's the truth. You get sober and you don't know what you like, what you're into. You've only been doing the same thing for the last however long. And so I started to explore hobbies. And one of the first things I did was pick up a ukulele and I taught myself how
Okay.
to play ukulele off of YouTube. And then I started playing open mics. And then from the open mics made me meet cool people. And then I met my husband. He's also in recovery. He has 10 years. So he started his journey a little bit before me.
Congratulations to him too.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's a great person. And then we kind of started a life together, still on my own journey of recovery. And when I met him, he was taking a tattoo apprenticeship. He had worked in the treatment industry for a long time. He did really well, was really successful, but he was experiencing the burnout, which I'm sure you are familiar with, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
No. Helping people get sober is so rewarding because people are so grateful for it.
Yeah. No, the burnout is real. And also, in the mental health field, God, do we need to take care of ourselves?
Yeah. Well, the self-care is like a checkbox that we never do.
We don't. It's not a requirement to also take care of ourselves. And honestly, I've experienced some people working in treatment that are sicker than the patient sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunately very common.
Yeah, totally. So he was experiencing the burnout and I'll do this art thing. I'm going to see where that goes. So he was taking on this apprenticeship and that was fun. Apprenticeships they're a lot of work. It's basically working for free for like a year and
right.
you earn the ability to learn. I think for the first 9 months, he didn't even touch a tattoo machine. And through that, I was still working in treatment. I worked through various positions. I was a tech, which I feel like is one of the hardest jobs because you actually spend the most time with the clients.
Right.
Interesting because you're the least qualified. You're usually hired based on the fact that you were once a drug addict, you know?
Right.
But you learn a lot. You learn a lot. I learned a lot about crisis and how to deal with them. I learned how to convince people to save their own lives because it's not when the client is at clinical in group with the therapist is when the client wants to leave and run away. Nope. It's at 3 a.m. when there's
right.
nobody there but this tech who has a year sober. And that's the person that's going to convince you, hey, you shouldn't leave. You should stay. Got really good at that. Then I worked in alumni, which is all about community, providing support, following up with people when they leave. I ran a lot of events just for people that stayed sober. And I also ran a 24/7 hotline for people to call in. This treatment center had been open for 15 years. So their alumni lists were insane. I got all sorts of calls from positive ones to negative ones to ones where I've had to call like the suicide hotline for people calling in, threatening to kill themselves, all sorts of situations that I experienced in that position. And then
right.
I wanted to do case management because I thought, okay, this is a job where it's less about feelings and it's more about just doing paperwork. But in reality,
Yeah.
it was interesting because I feel like the clients can't differentiate that you are not a therapist as a case manager.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I want a couple of things.
Yeah.
Good news. If there's a suicide hotline and I want to
Yes.
plug this, not 988 instead of the long number that used to be 988 across the country in the United States of America. So hopefully other countries will be doing that soon enough. Canada is looking into it. Wanted to plug that. No, don't make any
Absolutely.
money. Just want to make sure. But I think that it's also when you are so desperate, everyone is more of an expert than you.
Yeah.
So if I'm hurting because I'm wigging out because of the side effects of not drinking or having opioids issues or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. Even if the person is the less trained to talk to me, you always feel like they will know better than you
Right.
because you're all, you see yourself as all fucked up. But I think that that's what happens. And unfortunately, I think that the best part of my job ever was to work on a crisis team where they taught me for an hour how to handle the phones and an hour to handle the software. And they're like, all right, you're good. This is a suicide hotline.
No
Good luck.
way. Off to the
But
races?
and guess what? But that was the best training I ever got because you can't fake real
You
stories.
really can't.
Do I wish they would train? Can you train a little bit more? Yes, of course. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't train. But at the same time, I think that being a tech, you're able to also kind of like go get some extra help if needed.
Absolutely.
But it's also the best training ground because part of it is sometimes going, but I've been there
It's
too.
intuition.
Right.
I've seen people who have that intuition who don't too. You either got it or you don't. Probably like you were taught the software, then you were on the phones. You were either going to sink or swim.
Right, but I think it's not intuition for me. I think not intuition. I should say it shouldn't be overthought. It should be intuition.
Yeah.
For me, like one of the things that I've always loved about working with people in early recovery and sobriety, they're like, "You don't mince words." I'm like, "Why would I mince words? You don't want some rehearsed bullshit
Yeah.
answer. You want reality."
The truth.
And I think that sometimes when people they have to have some training, but sometimes it's better to just go, "Oh, fuck, I don't know what I would do if I were you." And that's just a genuine answer that the other person's like, "Wow, someone else would be stuck if I was like that." So I don't know. For me, there's a little bit of intuition and also meeting a client where is that. That's very
I
important.
love meeting people where they're at. I love that. I felt like people kept thinking I was a therapist, and then they'd end up trauma dumping on me.
Yeah, the trauma stuff I like to give to the expert. I get it.
You know, it's so funny because I tell my clinical director now, we're really close friends. Do you need me to pretend to be a therapist? No, all the clinicians that listen to this are like, don't say that. I went to school a long time. No, I'm sick. Because I was like, sometimes I would talk to a client and then I'd be like, I'm not the therapist, right? I'm here to get your FMLA filled out,
Right.
you know? So I was doing that. My husband finished his tattoo apprenticeship. He's tattooing. I was experiencing some of the burnout because also, did you work in a treatment facility ever?
No, I never did actually. I sent them to treatment
Yeah,
facilities,
yeah.
but
So the case manager also is the therapist assistant in a way. So I was working crazy hours and it was no break. And I was feeling the burnout. So we were like, let's just do a dramatic family change. And we partnered with another couple, longtime tattooers of like 20 years. I actually have sent her your podcast that you did recently on the entrepreneurship.
yes.
We both were listening to it because God did that speak to my heart. And I didn't know like a peer group like that existed, but we decided to start this business. And we opened a tattoo studio and we've been open for almost 2 years, but we opened in the pandemic, but we were in Florida. So our governor doesn't acknowledge COVID. So it didn't really affect our work, although we were very extra like safe and careful, wearing masks. We still try to kind of
Right.
enforce it. We've been really successful, which is really cool. What was interesting about switching to running a tattoo shop, out of 4 owners, I'm the only one that doesn't tattoo. So I do all the boring finances and QuickBooks and payroll. So the artists can do what artists do, you know?
The
I
admin.
am. Yeah, yeah. Case management, right? It just flowed right over. I had this weird moment where I thought, okay, when I was a case manager, I was working in detox. I dealt with a lot of those first week or two of someone getting sober, coming off the drugs. I've seen a lot of things, right?
Right.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to get a break. I'm going to be able to breathe. And what I realized was, oh, everyone in the world has mental health issues. I was like, I thought that I was needing treatment to take a break. And then I was like, oh, my customers, my artists, they all have stuff that they need to go to therapy for. Like I would just sense, and I had the intuition then to like manage people, manage personalities. And it was really interesting. Although tattooing is really fun. It's fun.
Well, I think that it's true though, but I think that tattoo artists, people who
Yeah.
tattooing, hairdressers, they're all like honorary therapists in my
Oh,
opinion.
people think that they are. I hear all the time. So people call in when they want tattoos and they'll literally say, oh, my blah, blah, blah just passed away and I want to get this tattoo to commemorate them. And it will be like such a fresh trauma for them. And in my head, I'm like, do they know that we are not therapists? We're talking like these people, they're artists and they're great people, but they have no background in mental health whatsoever. But people see them as some form of therapy. They see tattooing as some form of therapy. I've seen people crying in the tattoo chair while they're getting tattooed because it's some sort of like almost like closure or trauma release for them.
Yeah,
It is,
catharsis.
and it's it's pretty interesting to see. But yeah, they're like unpaid therapists. Well, they're paid, but they're not paid to be therapists.
No, they're paid. Correct. But I will always give props to my tattoo
Right.
artists, my hairdressers that I know
They
in
listen.
barbershops. I
They're
mean,
paid to listen.
they're sitting in a chair and they just want to fill the blanks
Yeah.
in.
Oh, so true.
But you mentioned something I want to go back to. You said, for me, the mind body spirit connection is so important.
Yes.
So you talked about mental health. Everyone has mental health issues. Well, for me personally, I agree with that 100%. Some people would say no, just crazy people do. So I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy proudly for, I don't know, 15 years, give or
Wow.
take at this point. Not every week, not like sometimes every week, sometimes not. Doesn't matter. Not judging. I'm just saying that's what I do. Have you ever been in therapy? Because that's, finding your way through therapy is really about, hey, people been in
How,
therapy
yeah.
before and how.
So I absolutely have. I don't even know if this is a real word, but I always say I'm very therapized. I don't think it is.
You know what? I've heard it so many
It
times on
might
this
be real.
podcast. I
Does
think I just
anyone think? Yeah,
copyright.
okay, I'm therapized or I'm institutionalized. So obviously I went to treatment, which treatment is it's like sober school. It's like therapy school. When you're in partial care level of treatment, you are in clinical hours, usually from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's 6 hours of therapy a day, whether that be group therapy, individual sessions weekly. And then they usually have a bunch of different ambulatory services. I've done that. I did that for my last stint. I think I was 45 days in treatment. And they say that the longer you're in treatment, the higher chance of success that you have. After that, I wasn't in therapy. I just worked 12-step programs and I kind of was just focusing on recovery. I always pursued my hobby thing that I was saying. I was being Julia Roberts, figuring out what I loved. That's where rock climbing came into things. But my next therapy experience was I was 3 years sober and I was about to get married. It was a month before I was married, and I was a stable human being. And then all of a sudden, I became almost like mentally unhinged. It was very weird. I lost my dad when I was 5 to suicide.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
no, it's
sorry.
okay. And it's funny, when I was in treatment and I was early sobriety, I had, like I said, all those clinical hours of groups, right? But what did I talk about? I talked about the most immediate things that were going on in my life. A lot of it was really petty stuff that didn't really matter. And I think that's where I was at.
It
It
mattered at the
mattered
time.
at the
But anyway.
time. And now, how trauma works, there's that book that says trauma that's in the body, right? That clinically, no offense, it goes over my head. And are you gonna pull it out?
No, that's yeah. I'm going to pull it out because I will say I've said this before on the podcast. But I'm
Yeah.
going to say it again. So this is the Bible of
Yes.
trauma for us.
I can't read it all the way
By
through. I
Ben,
have to read it in chunks.
but not only that, there's a medical Bible
Right.
somewhere about the medical pro. I have no interest in reading that because I'll go to the doctor and he read it and that's a great thing, or and she's
Yeah.
going to take care of me. So for me, I say that this book, when people say, oh, it's to me, that's
Yeah.
my Bible, but that does not mean that it's accessible to everyone, not to be
Yeah.
a dick, but just because that's how it is. So it is a good book, but most of my clients and most of my even
Aren't gonna read it.
and even my colleagues sometimes like that's dense, and I'm like,
It's so dense.
but it's great reading. I mean,
It is.
but
And the premise is like what I understand. So how I see it is that basically I had this actual huge traumatic event of losing my father to suicide.
yeah,
And probably attributed to why I use drugs and alcohol to cope with that trauma, disassociate from it, to feel a relief from this pain that was very, very deep. And the wedding, the moment, the father moment where he's supposed to walk me down the aisle, that it triggered that. It was like all of a sudden this volcano erupt and it could not hold any longer. Now, looking back, did I see evidence of the trauma playing throughout my whole life in my sobriety 3 years? I had so many triggers. I was so insecure, total abandonment issues that like showed up for me all through that time that I had not healed that trauma. it wasn't until I had 3 years sober where I was strong enough to deal with it. And so I got a trauma therapist, and I was like, this is not a great time for me. I'm getting married, but I want to do this. I want to do this work. Let's dive in. And because I was a 12-step person, when I have a problem, it's like I want to Google steps on how to fix it. I hate Googling how to forgive because it just says you just forgive, like I know
Right.
I need to know what to do. And that's what he did for me. We did in-depth work for about 6 months, and I realized so much about myself. And I honestly, I healed that wound. I tell people, first off, I make a lot of jokes about being a part of the Dead Dad Club because I have to. But do I cry yearly about it? Of course. Like, it's always a loss. There's nothing like losing a parent, but the triggers that came from that trauma, I've worked on them. My self-esteem is so much higher. I no longer have this internal story of that I'm worth leaving,
Right.
which was huge. That was my first experience with therapy. I don't think I could have handled that in my first year of sobriety either.
I am just taking a quick break of this interview to let you know that I've truly enjoyed doing 60 plus episodes of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. And I just want to remind you that when we're doing these podcasts, it's a labor of love. And what I mean by that is that there's not much revenue. It takes time, it takes money, and you need to distribute it and things like that. So one of the things that I was hoping to talk to you about is being able to help me out. You can always give a review, which is always beneficial. But more than that, I really want you to go to buymeacoffee.com/Steve Bisson. And the reason why I wanted you to go there is that you can give a donation of any kind to support this podcast that you hopefully have gotten a lot from. And any type of amount will be beneficial for me. And I just want to make sure that you can support me by doing so. And let's get back to the interview. Well, there's so many things that I want to jump off of that because there's a lot of points that you made here. The first point is, for me, I tell people that you never get over trauma. You get through it. And
right.
I will never, ever make it disappear. I do a lot of trauma work. And people are like, oh, I just don't want to think about it. I'm like, okay, well, go see a magician that thinks they can do that because I am not doing that for you. And people get sometimes offended by that. But I'm like, no, look, again, not the same way you lost your dad, but I lost my dad to name the cancer. He probably had it. And I saw him suffer tremendously for 3 weeks, and it was terrible. Do I cry every time I talk about my dad? No, I'm not crying right now. There was no guarantee I wouldn't, though, by the way. I could have.
I feel you.
So I tell people, like, I went through it, but my dad's memory will never go away, and seeing that will never go away. It's the same thing with mental health. It's the same thing with substance use. People are like, I just don't want to think about substances anymore. I just don't want to drink. I never want to think about a drink again. I'm like, okay, let me go get the magic wand. That'll work out. No, it's going to happen, except that it's going to be there instead of trying to avoid.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I really want to mention. So the trauma work, I congratulate you on that. It's hard work to do the trauma work.
It sucks.
Hey, I did it.
Believe I always say that. My husband was like, are you going to tell them that the trauma work sucks? I was like, yeah, it does. Well, it totally sucks. You got to do it.
I think you
got to do it.
If I have never said this on the podcast, I got to say it right now. Some people they come to me and they say, okay, let's get you to treatment. They're like, oh, treatment's going to make me feel better. I'm like, nah, you're going to suck for 7 days. It's going to be pretty bad. And they're like, what? I'm like, what? You want me to lie to you? Oh, it's going to be great.
There's light at the end of the tunnel, though.
After that, yeah. But I tell people, like, if you think it's going to be easy, this sobriety, trauma, whatever, no, let's not play games. And I think that not deceiving our clients and people patients or whatever we're calling them, I think it's important not to deceive them and tell them the truth.
Yeah.
I never tell people anything like lie. Oh, you're going to feel great. No, sometimes sobriety sucks. And the other thing too, is that you talked about not doing trauma work right away. I think we had a conversation prior to this, but I'm going to share it out loud so that people can listen to it on the podcast. The first 6 months, I tell people your brain's jello. I'm just trying to make you survive, and I'm just trying to keep you sober for 6 months. So we talk about the cat having fleas or things that are very easy. I'm not going, all right, let's talk about that trauma that you've had.
Yeah.
I
Can
just
you imagine?
Right.
Uh,
But a lot of people like don't get that, especially family members. They call me up, like, you told me you take care of my son, daughter, whatever. And they're like, well, you're not working on anything. I'm like, I'm keeping them sober for 6 months. After 6 months, the brain's kind of like mellowed out a little bit and I can get some stuff done, but
yeah.
that's still going to be like 6 months down the road before we really do a lot of work. And a lot of people don't understand that. So I don't know. We had a conversation beforehand, but you're right. Sometimes like the first few weeks is like, yes, matching socks works. No, don't wear matching socks. That's fine.
Yes. No meat or potatoes
Right.
for a little bit.
But
Hmm.
do you feel that that's another thing that people struggle with because at the beginning they want to feel better right away, and then we're kind of like, okay,
Oh,
we're just going to keep you alive, and we're going to keep you somewhat organized for the next 6 months.
yeah. I feel like we live in a society of instant gratification now.
Hence the problems with sobriety. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I also have other experiences with therapy. So I'm just a very open minded individual. I will honestly try anything that someone's like, hey, you should try this. I'll try it. I've had two rock climbing accidents, one that was not serious, but emotionally affected me, one that was serious, but also emotionally affected me. The first one was an ankle sprain when I first started sport climbing. For listeners that don't know what that is, that's when you're climbing a route and it's bolted, usually every like 4 to 10 feet apart, and you're clipping the rope as you go. So there's always this chance if you clipped into the last clip and now you're 2 feet above it and you're going to the next one. If you fall, you're gonna whip. Like you're gonna literally
yeah,
drop midair and whip. It's like it. You've probably seen documentaries of it. It looks wild. It feels even more wild.
you whip into the rock, so to speak.
Yeah, it's wild. So I whipped really hard. I sprained my ankle on the wall. I was feeling from that accident that every time I went climbing, I had a lot of fear. Now, a lot of people say to me all the time, even now, they'll be like, you're not afraid. Like, you must have no fear. Oh man, I have tons of fear. I just choose not to listen to it. And with experience of like continuing to climb, I know how to manage it better
Right.
than other people. And that's like one of the benefits of climbing is I also apply that to my life. So, oh, I'm afraid of doing something like a podcast, but I have this, my brain is used to me managing fear and like walking through it, or in this case, climb through it. Like exposure.
Right.
I said to my friend, she's a licensed mental health counselor and she's also certified in EMDR. And I know you are as well.
Right.
She was a baby clinician at this time. And so I was like, can I be your guinea pig? Just like my husband while he was learning to tattoo, that I was his guinea pig that he tattooed on a lot. I was like, can I be your guinea pig? And I know that our friendship is like probably inappropriate to do therapy, but I trust you and I have this relationship with you and I want to do this spraining of ankle fall through EMDR. And she was like, okay, well, she expected that when she did EMDR or got certified in EMDR that she would be, handling people's sexual assaults and what most people use EMDR for. She didn't expect it to be on a climbing accident. And what was crazy was that all these subconscious levels of fear of my mortality or like not being good enough and all these like weird emotions under the surface from this accident. We completed the session. I went climbing and I just felt like it was like my brain just reset. And I was like, oh, I'm okay. And it worked.
Right.
Boom. It was
And
that easy.
I want to just add something. It's never good to not have an emotion. So having no fear, having no anger, not having happiness, those things don't exist. It's
Right.
having a healthy level that we're looking for.
Yeah.
I need to be fearful that I hope it works out with Rachel. I hope this interview is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Was I fearful to the point where we're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my, no, because I've done it enough and I'm okay with that. It's learning to manage that fear and make it so whether you're rock climbing, whether you're doing a podcast or whatever you're doing in life, it's having a healthy level of fear. When you're driving a vehicle, no matter what vehicle you're driving, you should have a healthy level of fear because you have a lot of metal in front of you and it's a dangerous thing to do. You shouldn't be worried every single second. That's not healthy. And you should not be fearless because that's a problem too. It's getting to that middle ground. But
Right.
I want to go to something because I kind of nice transition to something we've talked about again beforehand. I'm not a risk taker per se, but like climbing and mental health sounds perfect for me. So how do we get to the point where we go like, oh, this climbing thing's a good mental health thing for me? How do we get there?
So cool. So it's becoming more normalized, and I'm seeing actually more documents online and blogs about it because climbing got way more popular through the pandemic. The amount of people I started climbing like a year into sobriety, so like 4 years ago. So the amount of people I saw at my local gym, it like doubled after the pandemic because people were just they were trying to do stuff.
Right.
So climbing is becoming cooler. And then also, I think mental health is like taking care of our mental health is becoming cooler.
Right.
It's definitely more talked about now than it ever was. And so I'm seeing blogs about it and the benefits, but I've actually experienced it. The first time I climbed, what attracted me to it was I was a year sober. I had all those little problems. The cat has fleas or whatever, you know what I mean? And I went climbing, and I remember that for that hour or two that I was climbing, all those problems like went away.
Right.
And I didn't realize it right then, but it felt good. It was like almost like a break. It was like a break. And I was totally in the moment of what I was doing.
Right.
When you're climbing, you're thinking, how am I going to get to the next hold? Like you're not thinking about your stressful job or your relationship or whatever's going on in your life. You're thinking about climbing. So you're totally in the moment. I caught what I call like the itis, and I
Oh,
pursued it.
okay.
I pursued it to the
I'll send you
extreme.
my card afterwards. But anyway.
Okay, all right. So I definitely went to the extreme. I pursued it. I wanted to know everything about it. I immediately booked a trip to Yosemite because that's like the fatherhood of climbing. It's the place to go, right?
Right.
I hired a guide, climbed a big mountain out there. It was really cool. Just fell in love with it. Since now being like 4 years into my climbing journey, and with my experience in the treatment industry, in the mental health industry, like I can see its benefits. So, like, you're in the moment, it is a break from whatever's going on in your life, but it also, like, incredibly builds your self esteem and confidence. So, you're climbing like a 5-5, which for people that don't know climbing, that's like one of the lowest grades. You're climbing the ladder. And then as you continue to climb over the next 6 months, you'll see the numbers start to go up and you start climbing harder and harder things. And I think with that like progress, it builds your confidence. You start to feel strong. You have goals. And also climbing is kind of, I always say it's like a dance. And if you watch, actually, we had climbing in the Olympics
Yes.
this past year,
I remember that.
which is also part of why it's like becoming more popular. Like that was the first time we've ever had climbing in the Olympics. If you saw the bouldering competitions, did you watch them?
Can't say I watch a whole lot of Olympics this year
Okay.
or last year.
So the bouldering is climbing where you have mats under you. You're not wearing a harness. You're not using ropes. It's under 15 feet. And they're almost like mathematical puzzle problems. So it's not like just climbing up. It's usually like weird weight distribution, and it's like a puzzle. And I think that like problem solving, I don't know the science behind it, but I just know it's good for your brain.
But I could give you a little bit of the science
Go
because
for it.
I do not climb.
Yeah.
Not that I'm opposed to it. I just my own
It's
stuff.
not your thing.
Right.
It's either your thing or it's not your thing.
But what I do a lot is walk with my clients. Some of my clients who are the most blocked, I'm like, let's go for a walk. And with walking, just like exercising of any kind, releases the most important things, dopamine and serotonin. And with that, there's an openness and a creative of freedom that really makes us feel like more accomplished. Most of my clients who have done just walking with me have said to me, wow, I feel so much better. It's better to, but I'm like, yeah, because your brain was busy, like trying to get, your body's kind of like developing the serotonin, the dopamine, the good feel drugs, so to speak, that are normal in our body. And so you talked about your mental health. You feel better about your mental health. And then the serotonin and dopamine said, let's reinforce that. So that's a little
Right.
bit of what's going on here. And we're reinforcing that behavior when we're doing any type of exercise. So for me, I think it's a question of time, not if, that we're going to have climbing therapy. We're going to have all these types of
Oh
therapy.
yeah. Do you ever feel like people open up more when they're outside too?
Well, I'm going to be very gender biased here, and I'm okay with that because there is a difference between men and women. Men walking side to side open up significantly more
Yeah.
than women. And women
Wow.
will open up too. And I have women who have had, barriers because of their trauma, because of whatever they have in their lives. So we go for a walk, and now suddenly the judgmental eyes of a therapist is not there. So therefore, they're able to talk more. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it's only men. I say women have that too, but men tend to do significantly better. And it really because now they opened up. You give them a small solution. I'm not solving the world with them there, but then they start going, oh, I feel better. Oh, I felt better talking about this. And then you've reinforced on a hormonal level and on a physical level and on a mental health level something. So for me, it's just
Right.
a question of when, not if, when we're
Yeah.
going to look at, because climbing therapy should be like, you're talking about those every 10 feet. Imagine if you could stop at the 100-foot level and just have that conversation with someone.
Oh my gosh. So that's another thing. So like I started in Florida, I was indoor climbing. And then because I got the itis, I of course just started booking trips all over. There was one point where in Florida like is so flat. Our like highest point is like the dump. The closest climbable rocks is in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is a 10-hour drive from where I was. I was getting off work, driving to Tennessee, climbing for Saturday, then driving home Sunday. That's how obsessed I was. So climbing outside is a totally different experience. And I always tell people like on a spiritual level, for me, it's like a spiritual thing. Like when I climb, I like to climb a mountain and then I sit back in my harness and I turn around and I look at what I just did. And it's usually the most gorgeous view you've ever seen. I always say that's when I feel God the most is when I'm sitting in my harness at the top. And then there's also that sense of accomplishment of I just climbed that. And then just being out in nature in general, it's so good.
I think that being closer to God or any type of spiritual belief system for me is also very important to the mental health healing and sobriety. And that's why, like, when you said that, I know all I can think of, and this is from watching TV, not personally knowing. How often have you been to Idaho to climb?
I've never been to Idaho. I've never been to Idaho.
I
I've
heard
been
I
all
hear good
over.
stuff. I hear good stuff.
It's good. I've been to Yosemite a couple times. I go to Red Rock. I've been to Red Rocks in Las Vegas a bunch because the airlines make the tickets real cheap because they think I'm going to the casino. But Red Rock National, well, I think it's a state park. I don't know if it's national or not. It's has they I think they say you could climb there your entire lifetime and not touch everything.
Yeah.
It's 15 minutes from the Vegas Strip though. If you ever go, I hate gambling. I For me, I just like when I chose to get sober, I chose to like abstain from all things bad
Yeah,
for
I
me.
get it.
So when I went to a casino to get food though, like a restaurant within one, and they were like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I was, "Oh, I'm climbing." And they were climbing what? And I was like, "I'm climbing the Red Rocks." And they were like, "What?" I was like, "This is 15 minutes from you. It's gorgeous, and you like don't know it exists. It's so wild." Climbed in Tennessee a lot, and then of course now I live in North Jersey as well, and I have the Shawana is the full term, but it's called the Gunks, and it's one of the most iconic climbing destinations in the country. It just doesn't have the same tourism level as Yosemite because it doesn't have like waterfalls. It's still beautiful, but it's like they call it like an OG climbing destination. Like
All right.
most of the routes that were established there were established in the last like maybe 50 years ago. So every now and then I'll be climbing and I'll see they're called pitons, but they're really old rusted metal. They look like bolts that the first climbers hit a hammer into the rock, which is kind of cool because you're like, wow, someone depended their life on this. 50 years ago. I wouldn't today, but
Well, the Red Rocks was something my kids actually went to recently, and then they went to, what is it, Zion National Park?
I haven't been there yet. That's
But
on my list.
and I remember all the pictures they took and they sent to me,
Crazy.
and I think about what you just said, and I'm like, oh, like, see, that's where you got to go.
I know. And then that's like another thing. When you are before recovery, most people that I meet who are in treatment, they have not lived. They have not traveled, most of them, in a long time. They've been doing the same thing. And I think that like I didn't get sober to just be sober. Actually that idea is really that just sounds so boring. I want to live my life to the fullest, not only getting to climb, but getting to see all these cool places. It's fulfilling.
One of the things that I remind also my clients based on what you just said is like when you get sober, I don't know how much you spend on substances, and I always tell them I don't really care about that,
Yeah.
but save half every day of what you would have used.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I've got $1,000 after 3 weeks. I said, guess what? That's your trip to blank. That's your new
Exactly.
tattoo. When we're talking whatever
Most
the
of them are getting tattoos.
right. Well, that's why I'm saying 1,000 is better than a buck 50.
Right.
And if the client who hears this knows who I'm talking about, hey, sorry, just saying. But I think that that's what I mean is that when we get sober, we need to think about how we are also saving our lives, how we are
Right.
getting closer to our spiritual life, whatever that is. I mean, God or whatever. I'm a practicing Buddhist, so I'm a big fan of any type of spiritual life. And then more importantly, like think about all the money you're saving and how you could use that money for other things instead of the substance. And I'm just thinking Zion National Park, Red Rocks, just
So many places.
and if you want to look up Idaho, I mean, I've been told that there's a lot of great places to go in Idaho. But the point is that I think that that's what sobriety is, not just being sober, it's so many other things. Which kind of brings me to I looked at the time, we're about an hour in already.
I know.
I was thinking about a little bit about, moving mountains recovery. So I want to hear
Okay.
more about it. Can you tell me more
All
about it?
right. So, right as we were signing our lease and our operating agreement for the tattoo shop, funny timing. It was around Christmas time 2 years ago, and we were up in my husband's hometown of Randolph, New Jersey, which is in Morris County. It's North Jersey, 45 minutes west of Manhattan. He grew up here. His experience was his dad's a doctor, came from like a wealthy family where you think there would be no problems, but he literally spent from 13 to 18 being in pretty much every therapeutic community. If you don't know what a therapeutic community is, it's one of those programs that you probably think only exist in movies, but they usually take adolescents and they believe in breaking you down before building you up, but they typically never really build you up. I think he would do like 9 month stints in these adolescent programs. They like make you clean with a toothbrush, shave your head, and it's for like quote unquote
Shame
bad
based.
kids.
Well, no, it's
Yep,
shame based.
total shame based.
And negative
Um,
reinforcement doesn't work. Just want to say that if you need proof, Karen Pryor's book, Don't Shoot the Dog. Anyway, go ahead.
yes. So that was his experience of from 13 to 18. He didn't get sober until he went to South Florida and went to a great treatment center down there. Changed his life. It's always been his dream of his to create a place in New Jersey that he think would have saved his life sooner if it existed. One of his childhood best friends, we were at this Christmas party. He was like, hey, we should open a treatment center together. Like, my dad is willing to like invest in it, blah, blah, blah. Jeff was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that sounds like a pipe dream, you know? And then after the party, I think like a couple weeks later, it was real proposals going on and like
Okay.
actual talk of this business happening. And then when it finally was like approved and we were just opening the tattoo shop, we were kind of like, oh crap, now we have to do this. And it took 2 years. New Jersey is extremely regulated, which I think is awesome. I think it keeps people that aren't serious about the treatment industry out.
But
It took us about 2 years to get a license, which gave us enough time to really properly build the program. And the program we made is an adventure therapy program. So me and Jeff being avid climbers, and then his childhood best friend Miles, he runs the adventure program. He is a tandem skydive instructor, and he also base jumps in his free time. If you've ever, are you familiar?
Oh, I know what base jumping is. Tell people what it is, basically.
Okay, so base jumping is similar to skydiving, except for the fact that when you base jump, you only have one parachute and you're jumping off a fixed object.
You're
So
not off a plane. When people know
not
base jumping,
a
think
plane,
about not a plane.
not a plane, buildings, antennas, bridges, off of like the right type of cliff, has to be a certain height. And because you're like usually when you skydive, you're jumping from like 10,000 to 14,000 feet high. So there's a lot of time, and you have that extra chute that is folded by like the FFA. It's extremely safe. Actually, the statistics for tandem skydiving is 1 out of 100,000 fatality, which is actually incredible odds. It's like a 0.006%
Right.
chance. Don't look up what your chances are for driving. Okay. Skydiving in the grand scheme, if you're talking statistics, it's extremely safe because there's so much time. Basically, if you do ever have to cut away a parachute, there's so much time for that reserve to come out.
Right.
Base jumping, you're talking like 8 seconds. So there's not a lot of room for error. There's less than 4,000 base jumpers in the world, and they have a database, and they document everything. And you'll see there's multiple fatalities, usually a month.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and he loves it. I've seen him base jump one time, and I understood it when I saw it. I understood why.
And that's not in your program, just for the record.
Nope, not the base jumping. Not the base jumping. Hell no. I think he has over 1,000 skydives.
Yeah, but that's great.
Under his belt. So he's very experienced. You don't do that until you're at that level. He's the reason why he base jumps is he says that the moment before he jumps, the world becomes completely silent. He becomes completely content with who he is, his life, everything. It's like the most serene moment. And I've seen it. I watched him do it once, and it was like the air tasted different. It was the craziest. It's a spiritual thing.
If people look up some YouTube videos of base jumping, you'll see that right after they jump.
You could go to the Moving Mountains Instagram. We have videos of him. Yeah. Okay. I'll send you it after this. But you'll be like, oh wow.
But maybe you can plug a little bit here. How do we reach you? How do we choose?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
So you can reach me. My email is rachel@movingmountainsrecovery.com. You could go to our website, which is www.movingmountainsrecovery.com. I don't want to confuse people. We're not taking people base jumping. We do take people skydiving. So basically it's a 30-day
and climbing.
Yeah, it's a 30-day substance use program. You can have secondary mental health. Pretty much everybody in our program usually has some sort of mental health. You go to groups Monday through Saturday. We focus on emotionally focused therapy. So like we're huge on attachment styles. Our whole idea was that there's like those wilderness programs, but they don't have a strong clinical backbone. So we have this strong clinical backbone of like working through your traumas with the clinician, doing groups, CBT, DBT therapy, all the whole nine. And then every Sunday we do something cool. So we climb outside, we go river rafting, we go hiking, we take them to this indoor snowboarding place. And most of our clients have never done these things before. So it's all instructed. They're having a blast, but they're also gaining these like really cool lessons. And then they process them through the week. And then if you complete the program, you get to skydive with Miles.
Oh, wow.
Which is cool. You'll see it on our website.
Oh,
They love it.
I'm going to relapse just to go there.
Yeah. They love it.
I'm kidding. So I'm cool. Kidding. Anyone listening?
I've only had a couple people that have not partaken in the skydive because they're scared. Well, we don't push anybody.
Oh, I love one of the few things I haven't done that I really want to do. So
you have to. Oh, yeah. It's so cool. It's like it's so safe and it's so controlled, but it makes you think that you're gonna die, and so you do have this weird serene moment before you jump on the plane. I've done it like 5 times. I don't love it. I get nervous thinking about it.
Well, we'll have to work on your anxiety at some point. So
I do. I get anxious thinking about it. They're always trying to get me to be certified, and I'm resisting.
Okay. Well, We'll work through that. And the other thing too that I want to share with everyone to make it very, very clear. South Jersey, very different than North Jersey.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that people understand how different it is. It's like saying New York City is like New York State. It is not the same. So for everyone to know that about New Jersey is the same is very important to me because it's such a beautiful setting and it's such a beautiful place. So I want to make sure I said that. So I will put this all on my your website. I'm going to put in your Instagram.
Yeah.
And ways to reach you. But I want to thank you because
oh my gosh,
I could talk about recovery for hours because there's so many things that you've said. You said mental health being secondary. Yeah, I don't like. I think I've met one person that didn't have a mental health diagnosis, and it doesn't have to be severe. It's just some mental health issues that come with that. But it's so nice to see someone who's enthused, 5 years in their recovery, wanting to help others. And to me, that's just the amazing, like to me, thinking about climbing, thinking about jumping out of a plane with a parachute, for the record, with a parachute. Just in case, we got to remember it's also mental health on this podcast. Yeah. But also being truthful about your therapy and the hard work that you've done. So I want to personally thank you. Mm-hmm. This was an amazing conversation. Truly enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Well, this concludes episode 62 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy, and it also concludes season 5 interviews. Episode 63 will be a review of all the conversations I've had, so I hope you join me then. Please like, subscribe, or follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for information, educational, and entertainment purposes. If you are struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor or therapist for consultation.